Fireside Tales. Hello, I'm Merlin, Mililli. Welcome to my fireside, where I tell tales within tales. And I drink coffee. Step on wood. And my cat mews at us. That's squeaky, by the way. Excuse me. Normally I drink out of my skull mug and tell you guys the story of the Grateful Dead. Because it's a story about reincarnation. And every week here at Fireside Tales, we discuss reincarnation. And we discuss how I'm a deadhead. So I tell the story that the Grateful Dead got their name from. And my animals photobomb. This is Little Bear. I don't know if you can see him, but he's here. So today, Fireside Tales will air on Christmas Eve. So we're going to do things a little differently this week. Normally I discuss the Akasha, or the Akashic Records. It's a meditative library where every soul has a book. And I've been going to the Akasha and reading my book since I was a teenager, and now I'm in my 40s. So every week I share a little bit of my book with you. So I'm going to do that this week, but then every week I've been singing David Crosby's Deja Vu. And since today's show is rather musical all on its own, and I'm going to discuss a song, I thought instead of singing a song at the end of the episode, I'd read a poem. So I'm going to recite a poem at the end of the show, and now we're just going to jump right into reincarnation. On our first show, our very first episode of Fireside Tales, we discussed my life right prior to this one. My very last life. But what I've discovered in my book is that I've lived many, many lives. So then on our second episode, I discussed the very first life in my book. So therefore, the very first person I can remember being. The book is not read like a regular book because it's meditative, So I just go there, and then I go to a section of the book and I touch the book and I have a memory, basically, that my soul remembers. Because the soul goes on. Body dies, and then you're born in a new baby body, and you grow and get to live a whole, full, hopefully, life again. But I also discuss with you every week how I'm a psychic medium, and I've been able to communicate with the spirit realm since I was a little kid, and apparently also in past lives. And every week I discuss these threads that I have from one life to the other that link all of them together. So we're discovering every week all these different threads that connect each life and sort of explain each person and who I am now. So in our second episode, we went all the way back to ancient Peru. And then we went to ancient Tibet. And then we went to ancient Egypt. And then we went to ancient Sumeria twice. Another thread. I seem to pop back up where I left off. But there's a theory on the spiritual plane among spirits about reincarnation, that those who are reincarnated have also been murdered. So I may have been murdered a lot. Thusly kind of explaining why I come back where I left off, like in the same region as I died in. So ancient Peru, ancient Tibet, there was a interdimensional travel issue where I had to spend a really long time as a cloud bird in a place called High Earth, which apparently is another dimension from this earthly realm. And ancient Egypt, ancient Sumeria twice, ancient Greece, and then there's this watermark, which I discuss regularly since we got there. We've been kind of working our way forward to present day. Oh, the watermark, I think, is the Great Flood. And it's also when time changed from BC to AD, which is interesting and makes some sense. For me, a good deal of time lapsed and no one was really sure how long we were on boats. But I boarded a boat in ancient Greece and ended up in ancient Scotland. And because Scotland was the only thing sticking out of the water, everything else was flooded. And then I ended up dying in ancient Scotland. Then my next life, I was born in another dimension, and I traveled to this dimension, to what is now ancient Scotland, or what is now Scotland, England, Ireland, and then I ended up in, I had another interdimensional issue, and I had to be what was called the Fairy Queen. May have been an insect for what seemed like a really, really, really long time, but apparently was not as long as I thought. Felt like 300 years. I'm not really sure how long it was. Time seems to move very differently in different dimensions, from one dimension to the other. So then I ended up in in Byzantium and Constantinople, which are both the same region, different time periods. Modern day Istanbul, Turkey. Um, then I ended up in France twice as a female, and twice I was burnt at the stake. So then I came back as a man and had a little better luck and lived some of my longest lives in Italy twice. Then I ended up in England, where I last left you with the death of Sir Isaac Newton, which I discussed in our last episode, how Newton's death was a little mysterious and no one really questions it. I question it because of the spirit's theory on the spiritual plane about being murdered. Snowplow is going by. It's quite loud. So nonetheless, I think Newton was murdered because, according to my book in the Akashic Records, I was Isaac Newton. And I came back in 1756 in Salzburg, Austria, after I had been Newton. But Newton's death was weird. People said he had maybe one friend and no one liked him, blah, blah, blah. And if that was true, then why did they give him, and who exactly gave him, the beautiful grave that he has? I believe it's at Westminster Abbey. It's beautiful. But if people didn't love him or even like him, why did they give him that? I feel like it was guilt. It was a guilt grave, because whoever gave him that grave may have also murdered him. And it may have been the church. It's one of my threads, is some push against the church. They burnt me at the stake. I got a little... It sticks with you. So, the church, the Vatican, ran the university that Newton worked at, and they got, I think they got tired of keeping him. No one was attending his classes. And for Newton, that was the measure of his worth. He didn't think anyone thought anything of his work or ever would think anything of his work. They didn't flatter him with praise when he was alive. They seem to have after he died. Nonetheless, Salzburg, Austria, 1756. I was born to a musician and his wife. I had an older sister and a younger brother. And when I was 3, I would sit and listen to my sister's lessons from my father, who was a musician and a composer. And I learned music from my father while he was teaching my sister. In this life, I was Mozart. I know it sounds nuts, but all of this sounds nuts, and I told you we were going to get weird and musical today. So, I've talked about my threads, and they are art and music, stargazing, reading, writing, nature, dogs, mountains. I have them written down here, but it's hard to read. I know I can't read any more of them. I'm trying to think what I missed. There's so many. I just have so much in common with all of the other lives I've lived. And this one in particular, now, in this life, in this body, in present day, I'm a musician and a composer. One person called me the Mozart of my time. But I'm letting you know I was the Mozart of his time, too. I just remember things. There's things from that life that just stuck with me. The music. I know it. In and out, back and forth, up and down. I'm sick of it. Like, I know it that well that I don't really want to listen to it. But I love it, and I know it better than any music I've ever listened to. And I incorporate the little blue into things now. And that was part of his character. That made it friendly and fluffy and brought up the tempo. I know why he did certain things that no one understands why. He didn't have sex with his cousin, and I know that. I know that because he did have sex with his cousin's friend. And those letters to his cousin were for his cousin's friend that he wasn't supposed to be dating. And it's Eloise was the singer. His wife's sister's name was Eloise. They always pronounce it wrong on all of the documentaries. It's Eloise. It's not that hard. Her name was Eloise. Give her some due respect. She was a magnificent singer. And I think they sort of had a back and forth love-hate relationship where he would try her voice and she would always win. And he was a man, so he didn't really like that. And so he went after her sister, kind of to spite her younger sister. But they worked together for a while nicely. The deaths that Mozart experienced, the death of his child, there's nothing like that. It still hurts. It's weird. The death of his mother, because I believe it was the archbishop decided he couldn't have his father come with him on tour, and his mother had to go instead. And tour now with creature comforts like air conditioning and heat and a closed vehicle that doesn't run by horses that poop and eat and stuff. Tour now is hard with all those things. Tour in 1780 something, 17, no, it would have been 1760s probably, 1750s, 60s, 70s. That's a long time ago. He toured by horseback all over Europe. War-torn Europe. It was scary. And he did it with his father as a young child. I remember things like, and I'm such a traveler. I can't help it. I'm so used to it. So, oh, and his death. He was sick for 15 days. He said he could taste death, and they said that there were no reports of him being unable to breathe. But, you know, if you can taste death, doesn't that mean you can't breathe? Death doesn't breathe. I think his best language, his best form of communication was music. And while he was dying, he wrote the Requiem. If you want to know whether he was murdered or not, listen to the Requiem. I think it tells all. And I think he was murdered. And I think it was Salieri who confessed later to having murdered Mozart. And people just didn't believe him. They thought it was the ravings of a madman or an old man or whatever. But Mozart passed away in 1791 at 35. That's strange. 36. Maybe he made it to 36. That's young. No, 36. He did make it to 36. And he had over 600 masterpieces to his name. And including, possibly, The Holly and the Ivy. Now, I've been a musician and a composer in other lives, but my spirit guides asked me one Christmas to change The Holly and the Ivy back to its original form. And they told me that I had written The Holly and the Ivy. My bets are on Mozart having written the original version of The Holly and the Ivy. Well, he worked for the church, sort of. He worked for the government or the royal emperor, and one of my threads has been push against the church. And I don't think Mozart was specifically unchristian. I think by writing The Holly and the Ivy, he just wanted to acknowledge Yule and solstice, because they were things then, and they're still things now. And they're planetary things. So you could see the influence of, say, Newton and Galileo and Michelangelo in this song in its original form. But they did weird things to it and made it something that it wasn't. They added the playing of the merry organ. And then they added Mary bore sweet Jesus Christ. To do poor sinners good, to redeem us all. They added that. And it just sat with me wrong from the get-go. And then there's this old BBC thing about the real story of Yule, in which they talk about how the Christians took this song from the pagans. And so I'd like to sing it the way that I adapted it and made it just in its original form, what I believe is its original form. So I'm going to sing that for you now. And then I'm going to read Clement C. Moore's "'Twas the Night Before Christmas" for you. So here we go. The holly and the ivy, when they are both full grown, of all the trees that are in the wood, the holly bears the crown. Oh, the rising of the sun and the running of the deer, the sweet singing in the solstice and the winter cheer. The holly bears a blossom that is white as lily flower, and when the sun is newly born, 'tis at the darkest hour. Oh, the rising of the sun and the running of the deer, the sweet singing in the solstice and the winter cheer. The holly bears a berry that's blood red in its hue, and when the sun is newly born, it maketh all things new. So I think that song was written by Mozart, and I think that is the original form. And then it doesn't have any organ silliness or, Jesus just wasn't in that one. He doesn't have to be in all of them, does he? I don't think Jesus was really born at Christmas. I think he was born in the spring. I don't mind celebrating his birth. I just feel like he doesn't need to be in every song if he wasn't even born in this season. Maybe it's okay to celebrate Mother Earth and her changes occasionally. I'm going to make some changes, hopefully, to 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, as I make changes to the story of the Grateful Dead. The Grateful Dead, by the way, is a band, psychedelic rock band from the 60s. Okay. Here we go. "'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in the hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. The children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads. With I in my kerchief and Pa in his cap, we'd just settled down for a long winter's nap, when out on the lawn there arose such a clatter, I sprang from my bed to see what was the matter. Away to the window I flew like a flash, tore open the window, and threw up the sash. The moon on the breast of the new-fallen snow gave a luster of midday to objects below, when what to my wondering eyes did appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer, with a little old driver so lively and quick, I knew in a moment it must be Saint Nick. More rapid than eagles his coursers they came, and he whistled and shouted and called them by name. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer and Vixen, on Comet, on Cupid, on Donner and Blitzen, to the top of the door, to the top of the wall. Dash away, dash away, dash away all. As the leaves that before the wild hurricane fly, when they meet with an obstacle, mount to the sky. So up to the housetop, the coursers, they flew, with a sleigh full of toys and St. Nicholas too. And then in a twinkling, I heard on the roof the prancing and pawing of each little hoof. As I drew in my head and was turning around, down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound. He was dressed all in fur from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. A bundle of toys he had flung on his back, and he looked like a peddler just opening his pack. His eyes, how they twinkled, his dimples, how merry. His cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry. His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the beard on his chin was as white as the snow. The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke, it encircled his head like a wreath. He had a broad face and a little round belly that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him in spite of myself. Excuse me. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head soon gave me to know I had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word, but went right to his work, and he filled all the stockings, then turned with a jerk, and laying a finger aside of his nose, and giving a nod up the chimney, he rose. He sprang to his sleigh, to his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew like the down of a thistle. But I heard him exclaim ere he rode out of sight, "Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night." Happy Christmas. Merry, Merry, everybody. Thanks for watching. Have a weird and wonderful winter weekend. Merry, Merry. Catch us next week.